Today officially marks the 1 year anniversary of Trump being president again. Trump 47 as opposed to Trump 45 because he's been president twice now. Yeah, so far over the past year, I think Trump 47 made Trump 45 look like a reasonable guy by comparison. So yeah, we're going to talk about some of the, highlights. I'm going to rate Trump. And in case you want to know my rating of Trump, I'll go ahead and just put it out there right now. It's a big fat stinking F. I give his first year as president again an F. And I think probably overall, I would give Trump 45 maybe a D rating. That's me being generous. Because, I think he did some things okay. He did some things that were shit. But overall, when 77 million of us voted for Trump, admittedly, I did not imagine Trump ending up this bad. I thought it was just going to be, for the most part, a continuation of Trump 45. Dealing with the immigration problem because it had gotten out of control, improving the economy because we were suffering from inflation. I just look back at the time I spent at the poll waiting to vote. And by the way, I voted for Republicans and Democrats, and I think one Libertarian, so I did try to spread out my votes. But yeah, even though I did it in memory of my grandfather, who was a Trump supporter and who would have voted for him if he was still alive, I still have to own the fact that I'm the one that cast that vote. And it doesn't absolve me from that vote. Neither does the fact that even if I wouldn't have voted for Trump, the majority of Texas voted for Trump. Not everybody in Texas, but he had a pretty big majority in the Lone Star State that voted for him. So even if I would have stayed home when I went early voting, it wouldn't have mattered. Trump would have won. But the point is, I still cast that vote. I still have to accept that. And I understand why people out there are angry with Trump voters, whether you're MAGA or you're just the average American that was trying to make a choice between Trump and Harris or a third-party candidate, and for whatever rhyme or reason, you chose Trump. Now, look, I've gone over it time and time again why I made that choice. I regret it, but I've regretted a lot of people I've voted for over the years. Probably not to this level. But here's the difference between voters like me and what's left of the MAGA cultists. At least I was able to open my eyes within a month or two after the election and realize that mistake and start speaking out. Unfortunately, there are those that are still blind and still drinking the Kool-Aid and are going to go along, ride or die with Trump to whatever end, even if it ends up in a bunker or a funny farm. By the way, he did sign an executive order to reopen mental institutions and insane asylums. That might be a good place for you, Trump, or maybe a nursing home for you and Biden and the rest of the gerontocracy that remains in Congress. But yeah, he gave a speech today where he just rambled on and on about his accomplishments. A lot of it's lies, by the way. And he had some weird comments that he made. And one of them was about an insane asylum that was near this park he allegedly used to play baseball at when he was a kid, but apparently he got the location wrong, but whatever. Anyways, let's go through some of the highlights of the past year, why I'm giving Trump an F rating instead of anything higher, because I feel like I can't go any higher because of how divided the country is and how many people have turned against him and the state of the nation as of right now, which is far from united, and it is not hot, hot, hot like Trump would say. Here's something that you have to understand. Just because Trump says something doesn't mean it's true. It's not scripture. In fact, a lot of the times it turns out to be a bold-faced lie. Like the debt, okay? The debt continues to get worse. Where's the savings? Where's the Doge that we were supposed to have, Elon, that was going to save us money and cut down on spending? Last year, it was $35 trillion. Now it's up to $39 trillion with a big fat T. And by the way, something else that happened today because of Trump's sick obsession with Greenland and not understanding that no means no. Well, a lot of our allies are turning against us in the EU and NATO and elsewhere. And, a lot of that has led to a bit of problems on the stock market, like $1.2, $1.3 trillion lost on the stock market today. So thank you, Trump, for that. I hold him responsible for that bullshit. So yeah, he can own that 1.2, 1.3 trillion dollar big fat L, which ends up making a lot of us suffer for it. By the way, so unemployment at record highs. I think it's officially 7.5 million. But bear in mind, a lot of people no longer bother registering with unemployment because eventually the benefits run out, or they've just given up. But they've spent months and months patiently trying to find a new job, putting resumes out there, going to job interviews. They're overqualified, or there's just not an opening, or whatever they were doing no longer exists because companies shut down, factories closed, yada yada yada. So I feel like that unemployment number is much higher than 7.5 million. Inflation, okay, we'll give them a small check mark here, not much, but I'm sure this will change quickly. Officially, inflation is a little bit better, but not by much. 2.7%. Last year was 2.9%. So it's very subtle, the difference between this year and last year. But then again, you do have some rising costs out there. There are things that are more expensive now than a year ago. So I don't even know if I can believe that inflation number. So let's talk about a few other things that have happened over the year. And by the way, I'm not going to cover every single thing, every little thing I won't catch, just some things that kind of, piqued my interest and why I consider him worthy of an F rating. So he renamed the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. Now, I guess you could give him some credit here. At least he went through Congress to do this. But the Gulf of Mexico has been called the Gulf of Mexico for centuries. Why did we have to change the name? There was no reason for it. But somewhere after the election, he just started talking about how he wants to call it the Gulf of America. And his cultists went along with it. His dick riders in Congress went along with it. And yeah, it got changed from Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. Well, I still consider it to be Gulf of Mexico, and most people in the world consider it to be Gulf of Mexico because it's been called Gulf of Mexico for centuries. So eventually, it'll officially get changed back in the U.S. So that was stupid. And I feel like it's a very divisive tactic by Trump just to divide us and cause some animosity between us and Mexico, which is unnecessary. The Department of Defense, by the way, the Department of Defense is still called the Department of Defense because Congress has to officially change the name. But he's calling it the Department of War with his crazy War Secretary Hegseth. But no, it's not the Department of War. You have to do that through Congress, Trump and Hegseth. The Kennedy Center. And this is one of many examples to come, probably, if we don't do something about it. The Kennedy Center was named in honor of the late President John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated tragically. That's what the Kennedy Center was named after. But Trump decided to throw his name up there as well. And I don't acknowledge that at all. I think that is insulting that he would add his name to that building. You have your name on enough buildings, on enough of these hotel rooms across the buildings or across the world. I don't know how many he has, but isn't that enough for you, Trump? But it's just insane. Then he bought a 747 from Qatar, but he claimed it was a gift, but I think we actually paid for it. Maybe we paid for it, maybe we didn't, but even if we didn't officially on the books pay for it, there was a little something happening underneath the surface when it comes to that 747, which wasn't brand new, by the way. And I guess it's going to get repurposed as another plane that makes up the fleet of Air Force One planes because they're kind of outdated. But anyways, that was another issue that came up. Pardons. A lot of pardons have been administered by Trump. Also a ton of executive orders. Yeah, lots of executive orders. Most of them are actually meaningless. It's just he gets his big giant marker and just signs executive order for this and that. And like I said, for the mental institutions, insane asylums, that would be great for you, Trump, and maybe some of your friends. Better yet, I'd rather just send him to a nursing home with Biden and with the rest of the gerontocracy that makes up Congress. It's been there forever because we don't have term limits or age caps. I think Trump is a prime example why we might want to consider age caps in the future. But anyways, along with the executive orders, he's commuted some people that were very questionable. He's also pardoned a lot of criminals that were convicted here and there. I'm talking about, from thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. But a lot of these people were pardoned because of Trump over the past year. And then you also had some of the January 6th rioters. Now, let's not get into that debate about whether you believe that the 2020 election was rigged or legit. Let's just talk about the people in general that were involved on January 6th on that terrible day. Because I was watching C-SPAN when that went down. I was watching Lauren Boebert. She was yelling and screaming during the whole count thing prior to the rioting. And I've never liked her since. But I saw people damaging the Capitol building, breaking windows, smashing their doors, stealing things out of the Capitol building, threatening and attacking police officers, as well as staff and members of our government. They should still be sitting behind bars, the rioters. I'm not talking about the ones that just walked inside the Capitol building and didn't really do anything except for just go inside. I'm talking about the violent offenders. Like, they should not have been pardoned. And allegedly, some of those that have been pardoned are now possibly working for ICE. I don't know if that's true, but it really wouldn't surprise me if that turned out to be the case. So yeah, there's a ton of people whose sentences were commuted, or full pardons were given, that did not deserve it, that should be sitting and rotting behind bars still. But that's one of the privileges of being president. His big, not so beautiful bill, which was a ton of money, by the way, a ton of money. And a chunk of that has gone towards funding ICE. We'll get back into ICE in a moment. It's on the list. I know I've talked about it a few times already. But there's some other questionable things that was in that huge, big, giant, beautiful bill. So big that we didn't have time to look through the bill, which was apparently larger than, I think, if you combined all three Lord of the Rings books, Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King. It would be that size or maybe larger when it comes to the page number. And that's an issue I have, not just with Trump, but with previous Congresses and presidents. The bills need to be simplified and need to be shorter. And everybody in Congress needs to have the right to read through the bill and at least given some time to read the bill before you vote one way or the other. It's a lot harder to read through something that equals all three books of Lord of the Rings in order to read through all of that, find the garbage, the crap that's hidden secretly in the big, beautiful bill, and try to get it out of there. So that's another issue I have. But yeah, the big, beautiful bill. Yay for that. So next, what was it? Oh yeah, he put up two big, giant flag poles with huge American flags. And look, I'm an American. I love America. I love this country. And we're all about, our history of, well, supposedly of freedom, liberty, equality, justice of law, Bill of Rights, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. But America's not perfect. We've done some bad things in the past. I don't wear the rose-colored glasses when it comes to America history, but I don't outright hate America like some people on the left have in the past. But I think it's good to acknowledge the good and the bad, and the fact that we are trying to aspire to do better, to be that beacon on the hill, the example. Well, not recently, but the idea of America is something I appreciate. And I love the stars and stripes. But there was already a flag on top of the White House. It's been there forever. Why did we have to have two more giant flagpoles with huge ass flags? It looks like a car dealership. And if you ever been near a car dealership in America, especially in the South, like in Louisiana or Texas, there are some car dealerships that have these big, huge American flags. I don't know. I feel like it's overcompensating. So speaking of the White House, apparently a building got torn down, right? The East Wing, which was the First Lady's quarters, right? Her offices and some other offices, been there for a while. It got torn down by Trump, and he didn't go through the proper channels to have it torn down, like through Congress or a specific committee. Like, I think it's like the Historical Preservation Committee in D.C. They're responsible for preserving the historical buildings, including the White House, which includes the West Wing and the East Wing. He just straight up decided, you know what, I'm going to bulldoze it. So he brings in contractors, he bulldozes it, and he says he's going to rebuild it. And it's going to be a big, giant, beautiful ballroom. It's going to look like an eyesore, and it's going to cost all this money. But don't worry, it's not going to cost the taxpayer anything because he has people that are going to pay for it. But the price keeps going up and up for this big, beautiful ballroom. I'm sure he won't name it after himself or won't try to. So that's something that the American people didn't exactly have a vote for, and I thought was rather odd. The history of the White House, it has had some work done over the years. During the Truman administration, the interior was gutted and rebuilt because it needed to be. And, the West Wing and the East Wing weren't always there. They were built over time. But there were processes that had to be taken place in order for these things to occur. Like, I think the bowling alley for Nixon, the basketball court for Obama, these things, were done, with, checks and balances. And it didn't just roll in with, with a demo crew and, cranes and destroy, an historic building like the East Wing, not without approval. Of course, the only approval Trump needs is himself, I guess. No, that's not the way it works, Trump. We do have the system in place. But yeah, so that's another thing that really grinded my gears. And what else we got? Oh, yeah, he wants to build an arch. So in a lot of major capitals throughout the world, like London, Berlin, Paris, there are these beautiful arches, right? They've been around for a few centuries, each of them. And Trump's like, oh, you know what? I want to build an arch. I want an arch in D.C. But why? Do we need one? No. We have quite a few beautiful monuments. We have the Washington Monument. We have the Lincoln Monument. We have the Jefferson Monument. We have several monuments around Washington, D.C. already. We don't need an arch. But, Trump wants one. So we're going to build one because he wants it. Not because we probably can't afford it, with that $39 trillion in debt. But he wants one. Great. Also, speaking of debt, what about the Golden Dome? Now, it's supposed to be set off the Iron Dome in Israel. But here's the thing. Israel is a way smaller country than the United States. And so the Iron Dome, for the most part, does its job, right? Whether you agree with Israel or disagree with Israel, that's not the point here. The point is the Iron Dome works for a small country, but a Golden Dome might not work so well to totally defend a much larger country like, I don't know, the United States that has, Hawaii in the Pacific. We have Alaska. And then we have the 48 states, right? From Washington, Oregon, California, all the way to Texas, all the way across the Mississippi, down to Florida, the Eastern Seaboard, all the way up to New York, New England, Maine. Okay, that's a pretty big chunk of land for a quote-unquote Golden Dome to protect. And I feel like this thing is going to be expensive as hell and completely unnecessary. We already had proper defenses. We have a military. We have fighter jets. We have fleets of warships. We already have the means to defend ourselves. We also have this other thing called diplomacy, where if we actually are diplomatic and work with most of the countries in the world, such as our allies in NATO, and I'll get to that in a moment, or even countries that we have some issues with, like Russia or China, well, we used to, there's still diplomacy there, right? Because they don't want to start a war of us, because if they attack us, then they know we're gonna attack them back. We're gonna, throw our birds into the air as well. So I don't think there was this real threat which justifies a Golden Dome. So I think that's a waste of money, unless you're intentionally trying to piss everybody off and make everybody want to declare war against you. Now let's talk about Trump's obsession with trinkets, because he just wanted to have a Nobel Peace Prize so badly. And, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to another person, another individual, a woman from Venezuela who was part of the opposition to Maduro. Now, the opposition won the election, like, what was it, a year ago or so? But Maduro and his thugs and his government, they prevented the election process from occurring. And so I think she had to flee, but she got a Nobel Peace Prize for it. And then Trump attacks Venezuela, basically takes Maduro, who, by the way, is a scumbag. I talked about this, 2 weeks ago. I have no sympathy for Maduro. He's an awful person. And I don't know if his wife is involved in all this, but she got taken too by the U.S. military. And I guess they're sitting somewhere in prison waiting trial. Okay. But so this opposition leader from Venezuela, basically, I guess trying to get on Trump's good side, offered Trump her Nobel Peace Prize. And it led to some really awesome, funny memes of so many other people offering Trump trophies. I even offered my 1992 RC first place amateur trophy when I was a kid. But yeah, so yeah, it's all obsession with the Nobel Peace Prize. And he got really mad at Norway because he didn't get a peace prize, even though he allegedly stopped 8 wars. Okay, whatever, Grandpa. So what's next? Oh, yeah, so ICE agents. Now, this is an issue that people will debate. If you believe that ICE should be abolished, then I understand, especially how U.S. citizens have been treated. Renee Good, I've talked about her a few times. There's been a few other examples that I'll touch on really quick. Recently, there was this young woman who was stopped outside of a Walmart parking lot, minding her own business, and she had these 2 masked men, fully armed, walk up to her, intimidating her, and basically asking papers. Papers, please. Show me your papers. Where are you from? In my opinion, this should never happen on the streets of America. Another prime example that broke my heart is what happened to this elderly gentleman. He was in his home minding his own business. ICE goes to the wrong address, and they drag this older man, who's a U.S. citizen, by the way, out of his home, barely closed, in the cold snow. They don't bother asking for his ID. And his neighbors are obviously upset over this. And some people that obviously don't have a heart or lack humanity, they were making fun of her, which I don't understand. What kind of person are you? What kind of piece of shit are you to get joy out of an old man suffering? What if this was your dad? What if this was your grandfather, a U.S. citizen who did nothing wrong? And then the DHS, they claimed that he was living with 2 sex offenders. That turned out to be a big fat lie, which some people are still spreading that lie. It's a fucking lie. It's been debunked. The old man was innocent. Yet some of you bastards have no sympathy for him or for any of these other U.S. citizens that have been victimized by ICE. And this is insane. So yeah, I understand why there's a growing number of people out there that just want ICE straight up abolished, especially when you see shit like this happen to this old man, as well as this young woman, and to a couple other examples I cited a week ago. And let's not forget what happened to Renee Good. Now, Cory Booker did put out a video basically citing some points that I've made recently about how ICE needs more training. They need to learn to de-escalate. They got to interact better with citizens. But there's a lot of people that are just so upset with everything that ICE has been doing under Secretary Noem and Bovino. By the way, they both deserve to be fired. But at the end, the blame really lies with the man at the top, the man we're talking about today. I do understand why some people believe that ICE should just be straight up abolished because of how many rights and liberties they have violated over the past several weeks now since they started doing this crap. And these people, U.S. citizens, we have this thing called constitutional rights. We have the First Amendment, freedom of speech. We have the Fourth Amendment. And time again, I've seen numerous examples of their rights being trampled on. And yeah, I mean, there are dangerous illegals in this country, and I don't want them in the country either. But why is it that previous administrations were able to deal with illegals without having to go to this extreme means of violating U.S. citizens' rights? And at the very least, there's illegals that get rounded up that didn't commit any other crime. They're not violent sex offenders, or members of a cartel, or gang members, or foreign agents, or terrorists. They're just average people that came to America for a better life, or they were trying to get away from, another country that they were living in because of poor conditions, lack of opportunities, terrible regimes. And I think that people need to find their humanity again, because some people have lost it. Any level of sympathy at all for example, that old man that we just showed, or that young woman. Imagine how she must feel. She has these 2 guys fully masked walking up to her while she's in a Walmart parking lot. I don't know what she's doing. I don't know where she's going. None of my business. It's her life, right? We all have a right to live our lives. But, she's just having a decent day probably. And then she gets approached by these 2 guys that are towering over her, fully armed, fully masked, and asking for her ID, asking where she's from. Like, where the fuck are you 2 from? How do you feel about that? It's insane. So, I don't know, maybe ICE should be abolished at this point. Maybe there is no saving it, especially if they're not going to come out and own their mistakes and apologize sincerely to that young woman at Walmart, or to that old man in Minneapolis, to Renee Good's family and to some of the other victims that I've cited. And there's plenty more victims out there, by the way, over the past several weeks. And yeah, they have rounded up some nasty people, okay? I won't deny the fact that ISIS has also rounded up nasty people. But they're also trampling on the rights of a lot of innocent Americans and U.S. citizens, and that is a police state. And then we set our sights on Greenland. I talked about this in a previous video as well. A lot of you know how I feel about this. The people of Greenland have told Trump no over and over again. The people of Denmark have told Trump no over and over again. Then you have this douchebag talking head on Fox News. He's been around for a while, Sean Hannity. He goes back to all the way to the 2000s. I think he still has his radio show. But at the time, he was pro-war, right? Pro-war, pro-W, and all that stuff. And now he's all pro-Trump. And he went on his show, and he talked about how we should pay all 56,000 people of Greenland $100,000 each. Now, look, I put out my posts, moderate screaming into the void. I know that most people aren't going to care what I have to say when it comes to that, except for you all. So thank you for watching, by the way. So, yeah, I asked Sean Hannity this question, and I don't expect a reply. Is he actually going to open up his own wallet? Because he's worth a few $1,000,000 and pay these 56,000 Greenlanders $100,000 each? If not, shut the fuck up, Sean Hannity. You know why? Because as I've already cited, we are $39 trillion in debt. We have citizens in this country right now struggling to survive, unemployed, barely surviving, on the streets. Oh yeah, Trump once again is jingling the whole $2,000. I'll talk about that in a moment to American citizens. But unless you're willing to pay out $100,000 to each of those 56,000 people in Greenland, shut the hell up, Sean Hannity, okay? I'm just sick and tired of all these Trump dick-riding talking heads who just blindly go along with every single thing he says. They never question him one time. Well, at least not on air. I'm willing to bet when the on-air light goes off and they're done recording or done streaming, I bet you there's quite a few things they say. But see, they're bought and paid for. They have no morals. They have no values. They have no honor. They're just doing it for the paycheck and for the hustle. They are grifters. And eventually their time is going to come to an end. But as I've already stated numerous times, and so have the 56,000 people in Greenland and Denmark, and our allies in NATO and the EU have said no to Trump regarding us acquiring Greenland. And Trump wonders why he got booed at the other night at the college national championship game between Miami and Indiana, even though they claimed he was cheered. No, he wasn't. Another lie. So, yeah, I mean, I give this administration, I give Trump a big fat F. F for fail, F for fraud, F for fake, fascist, fuck up, whatever you want to say. He deserves a big fat F. And then after the championship game, right, he just can't just let Americans have a moment peace without putting something else out there that's going to trigger Americans and the world in general. So he puts out this pathetic AI art. This one with him and Rubio and Vance. And by the way, Vance, you and your wife, congrats on your 4th child. But yeah, them going to Greenland, to U.S. territory. No, not going to happen. It's actually interesting because he finds falsely saying how he wants Greenland to be a state. 56,000 people is not going to give Greenland statehood. I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen. That's yet another lie by Representative Fine. What a shock. At best, you would be just another U.S. territory. Case in point, Puerto Rico has well over 1 million people, and it's been a territory of the United States for over a century, and it's still considered a territory. So this would be the same fate for Greenland. It would just be a territory, just like Puerto Rico, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, etc. But then Trump goes a step further with his photoshopping, and he posts this one as well. Now, this was a previous meeting that he had with several leaders in Europe. And they decided to add this little cute Photoshop of America having all this, which includes Canada, which Trump has talked about making the 51st state for a quick minute. Not exactly funny to most Canadians. And then, of course, Greenland. And then Venezuela. So this is what Trump truly wants. He wants to conquer and take control of all of this, which would kind of sort of piss off everybody in this room right here, as well as the people of Venezuela and Greenland, as well as our friends to the north, once one of our best allies, Canada. So yeah, just like I was talking about a few minutes ago, yeah, $1.2 trillion wiped out of the stock market. All this because Trump won't stop threatening Greenland and pissing off our allies in NATO when it comes to his sick obsession with taking Greenland by any means necessary, whether it's buying them or invading them, taking them over, annexing them, despite the fact that Greenland keeps saying no, no, no. Oh, and one final thing, like that $2,000 that Trump keeps jingling in our faces, right? So for a while now, Trump has promised $2,000 to, I guess, all middle-income Americans, which will totally save people that are suffering from way more debt right now and unemployment. But I guess 2,000 is better than nothing, right? But yeah, he wants to do this once again without going through Congress, behind their backs. This is what a dictator does, not a president. He is trying to strip away the powers and authorities of the legislative branch. And there's a lot of cowards in our Congress that are Trump dick riders, like Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, and many others that are, yes, sir, whatever you say, sir. When are you cowards going to finally have enough and grow a spine? The good news is there are more Republicans that are starting to speak out, fortunately. Well, they're being careful of how they speak out because they don't want to get treated the way MTG got treated. But more and more Republicans are getting fed up, and they might start, aligning with the Democrats and put aside their differences in order to hopefully do something about Trump. And as an epilogue to everything else that we've discussed, an article came out from New York Times. Well, it's in the quote-unquote opinion section in order for, I guess, the New York Times to save and cover their ass from being sued. 1 year ago, President Trump took an oath to serve the American people. Instead, he used the presidency to enrich himself. The New York Times editorial board writes, this is how Trump has pocketed at least $1.4 billion. If that article is true, which I'll leave below in the description section, I think you have to sign up for free membership to New York Times to read it, which I think is silly, but okay, New York Times. If it's true, then that pretty much explains why he doesn't take a official paycheck, which would be what, $400,000 a year? No, let's just hypothetically say that you took a job on the surface that would pay you $400,000, but you knew some sneaky ways to make more money. And so you deceive everybody, almost everybody, into, saying, hey, you know what? I'm just going to donate that money because I already have plenty of money. I don't need more money. I'm just here to save my country and help the American citizens. But then when you see that $1.4 billion, and it makes you realize that the $400,000 is nothing but chunk change by comparison. Yeah, $400,000 to the average American is a lot of money. Nothing compared to $1.4 billion, though. Once again, allegedly, right? There's no way that a nice, honest, upstanding guy like Trump, who's a legitimate businessman who's never committed any crimes or been convicted or conned anybody or might be on a certain Epstein list that, oh yeah, I forgot to mention that one as well. So yeah, another epilogue. The Epstein list, right? It still hasn't fully come out. And the parts that have come out has been redacted. And the Attorney General is breaking the law because she was supposed to release the Epstein list, about a month ago? I mean, that was a law that he reluctantly had to sign because of pressure from Congress. One of the few times where Congress actually grew a spine against Trump. So yeah, him going out of the way to protect the names on the Epstein list, including most likely his own, is another reason why Trump deserves that big, fat F. In conclusion, I don't know if there's any members of Congress that happen to watch my videos or staff members or friends or family of this representative or that senator, but Congress, there's a reason why we have three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, the judiciary, the Supreme Court, which, by the way, when are you going to rule on that tariff issue? because most of us are paying for the tariffs. That's another thing that I wanted to mention at the end. The tariffs that Trump has been just putting on all these countries, they're not the ones paying for it. We are. American citizens are paying for his tariffs. So that once again is coming out of our pockets. Congress, what is it going to take for you to say enough is enough after this past year of insanity from Trump's second administration? Everything that I cited and things that I didn't cite, because I'm sure I left off a few things. It happens. To where you're finally going to be like, you know what? This has gone too far. His approval rating is in the toilet. He has divided the country. He's turned most Americans against him. He's pissing off our allies of his mad ambitions for Greenland, even though Greenland and Denmark have said no. He has police state thugs trampling on the rights of U.S. citizens. And the list goes on and on. There's so many things that we have cited over the past several minutes already, and other things that I forgot to mention that would be worthy of him being impeached over. Trump's actions is either going to lead us to a civil war or World War III, or perhaps even both at the same time if he's allowed to continue down this path. Congress, you need to do something about this. You have the power to stand up to the executive branch, but it comes down to enough of you growing a spine. Put aside your differences as Republicans and Democrats and stand together as members of Congress that are supposed to represent we the people and do something about the president. Besides impeachment, the other option is the 25th Amendment, which can be invoked, Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, but it's the vice president and the cabinet that have to sign the declaration for using the 25th Amendment, along with the Speaker of the House, the President pro temp of the Senate, making the vice president the acting president. So you have a lot of pieces in place right there that would have to be on board with invoking the 25th Amendment. Let's just say Vance has misgivings, or have had misgivings for a while now and have just kept quiet about it because he doesn't want to get on Trump's bad side. But maybe somewhere along the way, he's just had enough, right? Maybe Speaker Johnson has started to finally have enough, or Leader Thune, or other members of both chambers. It would basically take 2/3 of both the House and the Senate in order to invoke the 25th Amendment in order to remove Trump. That or an impeachment. Those are the only two legal options that we have. Impeachment, which is done by the House, and then the Senate acts as the jurors, and then enough of them have to vote in favor of impeachment in order to kick him out of office, or Trump has to do the right thing and simply resign like Nixon did, or the 25th Amendment route. Now, he is getting up there in the years. He's probably not as healthy as he claims. He does like the fast food, and that does cause serious health problems. But I leave those options to the Grim Reaper, God, higher power. That's above our pay grade. So, except for that, I mean, there's only a couple options we have to legally remove Trump from office. But I am concerned with how the next 3 years of a hypothetical second Trump administration will go, especially after a lot of this nonsense that we just went over, and a few things that I mentioned and things that I did not mention. I'm definitely not the biggest fan of Democrats. There's times I agree with them, there's times I disagree with them, but it does feel like that another option we might have is in November if enough Democrats take over both the House and the Senate to do something about Trump. So that's a long distant third option if we even make it to Election Day.